The offer of probationary membership to the Galactic Concord was, for humanity, a momentous occasion. After centuries of reaching for the stars, finally, they were being invited to the Grand Council of Civilizations. The Concord, a vast amalgamation of species from across the spiral arm, was renowned for its wisdom, its ancient lineage, and its cautious, methodical approach to galactic affairs. Humanity, by contrast, was seen as young, energetic, certainly, innovative in chaotic bursts, yes, but fundamentally, a species still damp behind its collective ears, with a history that, while meticulously documented by their own reckoning, was but a blink in the eye of cosmic time. Ambassador Rayner Vance, Earth's first envoy to the Concord, presented humanity's formal application with a mixture of pride and humility. He spoke of human aspirations for peace, for shared knowledge, for a place among the mature civilizations of the galaxy. The Concord's primary representative, a towering crystalline entity known as Speaker Prime Thuron, listened with an air of serene patience. "Species shows promise, Ambassador Vance," Thuron had intoned, its voice a series of resonant chimes. "Your rapid technological ascent is notable. Your cultural output, while somewhat boisterous, has its merits. As per Concord Protocol for probationary aspirants, we request full access to your species' historical archives. This allows our xenohistorian guilds to achieve a comprehensive understanding of your societal evolution, your conflict resolutions, and your overall trajectory. It is a standard and vital step towards integration." Humanity readily agreed. What was there to hide? Their history was complex, certainly, marked by periods of astonishing violence and breathtaking compassion, of foolishness and brilliance. But it was their history, and they had learned from it, or so they believed. The archives, a vast digital repository stored in the newly constructed Terran Concordian Embassy on Luna, were open to the Concord scholars. Human historians, initially thrilled at the prospect of collaborating with ancient alien intellects, prepared for profound discussions on cultural relativism and developmental paradigms. They envisioned themselves as proud curators, showcasing humanity's journey from warring tribes to a unified, spacefaring people. They imagined the Concordians nodding sagely, perhaps offering gentle critiques of their more exuberant periods. A team of Concordian xenohistorians, primarily composed of the meticulously logical Visor and the deeply analytical, multi-limbed archivists of Cathol, set to work. The Visor, beings of pure thought housed in sleek, minimalist cybernetic shells, were renowned for their ability to process and categorize information with unparalleled speed and accuracy. The Cathol, with their patient, multi-generational approach to knowledge, were masters of discerning subtle patterns and underlying civilizational currents. Initially, their findings were unremarkable. They catalogued humanity's progression through various societal stages: tribalism, feudalism, industrialization, information age. They noted the familiar patterns of resource competition, ideological clashes, and territorial disputes that marked most young civilizations. Human art was vibrant, but often emotionally excessive. Human science was cleverly adaptive, but lacking foundational elegance. The Concordian historians exchanged polite, if somewhat condescending, internal data packets. "A typical Class C7 civilization," one Visor noted, "prone to internal conflict but demonstrating nascent global cohesion. Potential for eventual full membership. Moderate." The human historians assigned to assist them, like Dr. Aris Thorne, a specialist in 20th and 21st century Earth conflicts, found the Concordians to be polite but distant. "They seem particularly interested in our wars," Aris mentioned to a colleague. "But they approach it so, clinically, like they're cataloging insect mating rituals. No real sense of the horror or the heroism, for that matter." It was lead archivist Cathol Prime, an ancient being whose many limbs moved with slow, deliberate grace, who first began to sense an anomaly. The Cathol did not just read history, they felt its echoes, its psychic weight. While the Visor were efficiently categorizing casualty statistics and weapon yields from humanity's numerous wars, Cathol Prime was delving into the philosophies behind those conflicts. The sheer volume of documented conflict is extensive for such a short civilizational span, Cathol Prime noted to its VSOR counterparts, its cluster of sensory organs twitching. But it is not the frequency, VSOR Unit 7, it is the nature of some of these conflicts that gives my primary processing cluster pause. The VSOR, ever literal, cross-referenced. Human conflict parameters fall within expected ranges for a species at their developmental stage. Increased lethality correlates with technological advancement, a standard curve. No, Cathol Prime insisted, its many hands sifting through holographic projections of ancient texts and grainy, flickering images. Look deeper, not at the what, but at the why, and more importantly, the to what extent. The Concordian team began to focus on periods humanity itself had labeled world wars, total wars, and the chillingly named Cold War. They analyzed the strategic doctrines, the propaganda, the political speeches, the philosophical treatises written by humans during these times. It was a junior VSOR analyst, Unit 734, while processing data from Earth's mid-20th century, that flagged the first truly incomprehensible concept. It was a term found in military and political documents. Scorched Earth policy. Query, Unit 734, transmitted to the collective. This doctrine, it describes the deliberate destruction of one's own assets, infrastructure, and resources to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. This is counter-survival. It does not compute with standard resource preservation protocols in conflict. Older VSOR units cross-reference this with other species' histories. Intentional destruction of enemy assets was common. Accidental damage to one's own also common. But the deliberate, systematic annihilation of one's own homeland as a strategic choice, this was rare, very rare, and unsettling. Then they found the records of sieges where entire populations had chosen mass suicide rather than surrender. They unearthed military strategies that accepted casualty rates approaching 90% for objectives deemed vital. They read philosophical arguments justifying the sacrifice of a generation for an ideal. The human historians, when queried about these periods, spoke of desperate times, of unwavering resolve, of the price of freedom. Their voices held a strange mixture of sorrow and a grim pride that the Concordians found increasingly difficult to categorize. The true turning point came when the Xenohistorians reached humanity's nuclear age. They analyzed the arms race, the proliferation of weapons capable of sterilizing the entire planet many times over. And then they found it. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. Lead archivist Cathol Prime spent 3 full rotations in silent contemplation after absorbing the core tenets of MAD. Its usually calm bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically. They built weapons, Cathol Prime finally announced to the assembled Xenohistorians, its voice resonating with a new, profound gravity. That, if used, would guarantee their own extinction along with that of their enemy. The VSOR data streams stuttered. Clarification. The doctrine assumes rational actors would therefore be deterred from initiating conflict. Precisely, Cathol Prime affirmed, but analyzed the underlying psychology. They held their entire civilization, their very species, hostage. They looked into the abyss of self-annihilation and made it a cornerstone of their global security policy for decades. It is illogical, VSOR Unit 7 stated, its processors struggling. The primary directive of any civilization is survival. This strategy embraces species suicide as a deterrent. Not just embraces it, a human historian, Dr. Lena Hansen, quietly interjected from the observation gallery. She had been listening with growing unease. We perfected it. We built automated systems to ensure that even if our leadership was decapitated, the response would be launched, ensuring the mutual part. We called it the dead hand. The term dead hand echoed in the sterile archival chamber. The Concordians focused their sensors on Dr. Hansen. Her expression was somber, almost pained, yet there was an undercurrent of something else, a chilling acceptance. You willingly engineered a scenario where your own extinction was not just a possibility, but a programmed certainty in response to an enemy attack? Cathal Prime asked, its voice softer now, laced with something akin to disbelief. Yes, Dr. Hansen said. The logic, as twisted as it might seem to you, was that the only way to prevent one side from using these weapons was to guarantee that everyone would lose if they were ever used. It was the ultimate form of spite, perhaps. If you kill us, you die too. No victory, no spoils, just ashes. This was the oh shit revelation for the Galactic Concord. This wasn't the history of a young, bumbling species. This was the history of a species that had stared into the void of its own making and had not blinked. It was the history of a species that, when pushed, when truly threatened, when its core values or existence were on the line, possessed a terrifying capacity for what the Concordians could only classify as existential stubbornness, and a capacity for utterly self-destructive spite. They hadn't just fought wars. They had philosophically, technologically, and psychologically prepared for their own complete and utter annihilation as a strategic option. They had weaponized the concept of a Pyrrhic victory to its absolute, species-ending extreme. If they couldn't have their world, their way of life, then no one could. The Xenohistorians began to reevaluate everything. The constant internal squabbles of humanity, the boisterous culture, the rapid, chaotic innovation, it all took on a new, more ominous light. This was not a species that feared oblivion in the way others did. They had lived with it, planned for it, and in a strange way made peace with it as a potential cost of defiance. The reports sent back to the Concord High Council were no longer routine. They were flagged with urgent warnings, appended with psychological profiles that baffled and horrified the ancient, stable civilizations of the Concord. Speaker Prime Thuron, upon reviewing the full analysis of humanity's Cold War, doctrines and total war, historical precedents, remained silent for an unprecedented length of its personal cycle. The perception of humanity within the Concord shifted almost overnight. They were no longer the galactic equivalent of enthusiastic teenagers. They were something else, something far more complex and far more dangerous. Their history wasn't a record of youthful folly. It was a testament to a species that would, quite literally, burn down the universe to spite an enemy if pushed too far. Or more chillingly, burn down their own house, just to ensure an invader gained nothing but radioactive cinders. The offer of probationary membership was not rescinded. That, the Concord realized, might be seen as a provocation, and provoking humanity was suddenly a deeply unattractive prospect. Instead, the terms were adjusted. Humanity was fast-tracked to a special associate status, one usually reserved for species with unique, strategically vital, but potentially volatile characteristics. The access to their archives was continued, but now with a new, unspoken directive. Understand this species. Understand what it takes to not push them to the brink. Ambassador Vance found himself in meetings not about trade tariffs or cultural exchange quotas, but in hushed, high-level discussions about existential deterrence theory and historical precedents for species-level conflict resolution. The elder races of the Concord, who had overseen millennia of galactic peace through intricate diplomacy and carefully balanced power, now looked at humanity with a new, wary respect. They were like beings who had discovered the quiet, unassuming neighbor down the hall not only had a house full of explosives, but also a philosophical treatise on why, under certain circumstances, blowing up the entire street was a perfectly rational response. A new legend, a new warning began to circulate among the star lanes. Do not presume with the Terrans. Their history is a map of self-drawn lines in the sand, and the sand is glassed. The archivists of the Concord continued their work, no longer with condescension, but with a grim fascination, cataloguing the many ways humans had found to say, over my dead body, and actually mean it on a planetary, even species-wide scale. Earth was no longer just another burgeoning world. It was a testament to the terrifying power of a species that had learned to weaponize its own extinction. And the galaxy, a little more nervously, made room.